Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing more big news coming out from the San Jose Sharks. Today, it's that they have traded Justin Braun to the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for a second-round pick this year, which ends up being the 41st overall, as well as a third-round pick in the following year. So as predicted, the Sharks are having to trade Justin Braun to unload some cap space, giving them what will potentially be $17 million, which I'll get to a bit later, and they receive a second and third round pick in return. So my predicted return for a Justin Braun trade that was likely to happen, as it has, was either a late first round pick, but since I was the Philadelphia Flyers, you're not going to get a late first round pick. They only have a pretty early one. Or you were probably going to get about a second or third round pick and a decent prospect. The Sharks forego the decent prospect and just get another pick in return. So a pretty solid one for the San Jose Sharks. But it is quite sad to see Justin Braun leave. The Sharks actually haven't really made a trade where they traded away like an established Sharks player in a pretty long time, I'd say. Most of the trades they've made in the past few years have been trading away picks, trading away maybe younger rookies like a Goldobin. I would say, unless I'm forgetting something, the last time the Sharks actually made a trade for a player who played on the Sharks for at least a few years was maybe when they traded Danny Heatley for Havlat, but even Heatley wasn't there for that long, or maybe Setoguchi in the Brent Burns trade all the way back in 2011. Since then, I don't really recall the last time the Sharks really made a huge trade like that. There were players leaving, of course, Patrick Marleau a couple years back leaving free agency, but it doesn't really feel the same when you leave in free agency compared to when you actually get traded. And so it is sad to see Justin Braun go. He has given many great years to the Sharks organization. He has consistently been a solid defenseman, and he made up sort of a major pairing on the Sharks for so long. Vlasic and Braun were such a big part of that team of the Sharks. They stayed together as a pairing for multiple years through the McClellan to the Peter DeBoer era, and it was only this past year where that has really fallen apart a bit. But even when the Sharks were playing their best hockey from early December to about mid-January, it was Burns with Shemek, Carlson with Dillon, and Vlasic with Braun. So we still saw that pairing played very well together. And so while Braun maybe fell off a bit this year, had a bit of a rough year, I hope that doesn't really plague the memories of his time with the Sharks, because he was consistently solid. Of course, I think back to the 2016 Stanley Cup playoffs run, when the Sharks faced off against the Kings in the first round, matched up Braun and Vlasic against Tyler Toffoli, who that year had been very, very good, and limited his production. Did the same thing, Braun and Vlasic against Philip Forsberg against the Nashville Predators in the second round, limited him very well. And in the third round against the Blues, they matched him up against Vladimir Tarasenko, and he only ended up scoring a couple of goals late in the final game of that series, Game 6. And so they did a very good job then. They've been doing a very good job for so many years. And so it's sad to see Justin Braun leave, but he was likely the easiest player to unload for the most amount of cash. Arundel, Melker Karlsson, probably not that easy to be able to trade, plus they're not making all that much. And then if you go for players making more than Braun, when you come to someone like a Kane, it would be extremely difficult to even attempt to trade Evander Kane. So Braun was in that sweet spot, and he ends up getting traded. So the Sharks have now an open spot on that final pairing for themselves, and as I said, potentially $17 million. I say potentially because there is also news today that the cap may not rise to the predicted $83 million. It may cap out at $82 million or potentially even lower, which could mean some trouble for the Sharks, because with the current projection of $17 million in terms of cap space, they could afford to give Pavelski about $6.5, LeBanc $3.5, and Meyer about $5, which would be $15 million, and then give someone like Heed $900K or maybe $1 million to play that final spot on their defensive pairing, as well as just give the rest to Thornton if he wishes, or get somebody else for about $1 million to play in the third line center position, and all would be good for the Sharks. But if this cap leaves them with only about $16 million or maybe even $15.5 million, they can still sign Pavelski, LeBanc, and Meyer, but they would be left with a couple of empty spots that may potentially have to be filled with some ELCs or they would need someone like Pavelski or potentially like LeBanc to take a bit of a pay cut from what they probably could get if they want to fit everybody under. But with the moving of Justin Braun, it has been made a lot easier. It now seems quite possible. And so all the people who were dreading the fact that Pavelski may not stay with the Sharks, well, Doug Wilson has quelled those fears rather quickly, literally the day after the Erik Karlsson signing. And so it seems mostly likely, I won't say it's confirmed at all, that Joe Pavelski will return with the Sharks, but we'll have to see how the rest of the offseason plays out, because not even at the NHL draft yet, and Doug Wilson has probably already made the two biggest moves of the offseason. Class dismissed.